Nobody begged you to put on your bugles or your gold badge. Nobody pleaded with you to lead them. You wanted the new bars, the new helmet, and to be the boss. You said, "Follow me, I will lead you." You committed to more than collecting a pay raise. You are now in debt to everyone below you in rank. You owe them, and you owe their families. You said, "I will do more. I will know more." You said, "I'm the person best suited to bring you home every shift." That means you committed to doing more than just showing up for work. It means you committed to being a lifelong learner. It means you committed to doing extra things that aren't always fun, aren't always glamorous, and are sure as hell things you don't always want to do. Just remember, nobody begged you. You're an officer.
All right, everybody. Young Officers on Fire, Rob Fisher, Ryan Selleck. We thought, one, I got to come over here and meet with Ryan. We live in the same state, just on different sides of the mountains, and we were working on some other things. And we thought that would be a great time to bring back the discussion on with the Atlanta fire captain, Danny Dwyer. Well, everybody's been talking about COVID-19, all the other crap that's going on, and so we wanted to kind of bring a discussion around kind of what was going on with Danny, and just to kind of bring everybody up to speed. If you're in the fire service, you know what's going on. You've heard this story, but basically, he was suspended for his actions on a fire that actually occurred several months ago. I believe it was in June. And so he got suspended as a result of finding it was a rescue situation where they found a lady inside a house that was on fire. They pulled her out. She ended up succumbing to her injuries, but as a result, there was an investigation, and he was suspended for 2 days without pay, and that started a huge uproar in social media, and now it has kind of died off, and everybody's worried about the coronavirus now. So Ryan and I thought, well, why not? We've just been discussing this, the ins and outs of it, and why not do like a little thing that we can kind of bring it back to light and have some discussion on the issue. So anything you want to add to that? Or
no, we'll jump into it, and just so we're clear, we have some secondhand information, but Danny has not been able to publicly speak out about this, so all the facts around it are not 100% clear. But we're going to go off what we know, some video that we have, sound recording, and then the statement from the chief. Look at Atlanta's standards of cover, their intent, and kind of go through that. So let's. You want to pull up the first thing we have is the actual statement from the chief, and then we can review the video. This goes over what he was actually charged with.
So this is from a CNN article. Basically, what he was charged with, quoting the chief: "While performing your duties, you entered the structure without your crew members, which is an immediate conflict with no freelancing, accountability, and maintaining crew integrity." And I think just generally speaking, we can all probably from our fire service backgrounds know that in a basic ICS structure, IMS system, is that we've all heard about no freelancing. We talk about accountability and keeping crew integrity. We'll get into the discussion about this a little bit further, but this is something I think that seems fairly realistic of an issue that somebody could have within their organization.
Yeah, and I think, we definitely want to be realistic that there's probably things that could have been done better, that different decisions that could have been made, but in the end, we need to look at the overall outcome of the incident. So we're not saying that there was a flawless decision-making process throughout. There's definitely things that probably could have been handled a little bit better, but in the end, was this something we're going to discipline a guy over. So let's pull up the video for those of you that haven't seen it, and we will.
Before we start the video itself, what it's we've not talked to anybody from Atlanta to break this all down, and they can describe what all is going on here. You can see this video is being taken by somebody that's at the scene. I believe it's not somebody that's with the fire department, but and you can hear the radio traffic going on at the same time. We believe from looking at the video and as it plays out, the individual that is there on the porch on their knees is Danny himself. They had just removed the gal, or he's just coming out from there, and his crew is finally coming to assist him. We think that because the individual that's climbing up the stairs has a New York roof hook in his hand. So, and then you're going to see through the video, and as you listen to the radio traffic, they're actually dragging something down across the porch and down the steps, and with the radio traffic, you're going to hear that they've removed somebody out on the alpha side of the building. So we're assuming that is Danny and his crew or other members that are removing the 95-year-old woman from this fire.
Magic Cruz, we're going defensive.
Well, that just kind of sucked that went into.
Magic Cruz, we're going defensive. Come off of the porch, come off of the porch. Off of the porch, come off of the porch, we're going defensive. We'll hear you copy that. Still about 15 hours. Get the 28th, man. We have a victim being pulled out of this house. What side are you on? On the outside, on the outside. Don't get out of the porch. I'm clear. Command Atlanta Fire. I switch from offensive to defensive. We see defensive going. Yeah, that's there. Hey! Go ahead. Give me your EMS tag. Give me your EMS tag. Okay.
All right, so you can see from the video there, like we said, that we presume that was Danny on the top of the porch. And I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Atlanta Fire Department. I wasn't there, and I haven't talked to anybody that was actually at that fire. But I can piece things together from fires that I've been on and how our department would be responding to something like this. So we think that Danny's on the porch. They're bringing the individual out, the victim out. At that time, the IC, and in my role in the fire department, I'm a battalion chief, so I'm sitting in the IC's role. The IC has changing conditions. They are changing from a offensive strategy to a defensive strategy, and now they have a rescue situation going on at the same time. I could see where, if as an IC, that I think one of the things the crews could, and I'm not being critical of them, but one of the things that could help alleviate some of this freelance opinion is, if crews had a rescue situation, they got to the porch, they could see where the victim is inside the building. There is a hose line up there. So you should see in the video, after they bring the individual out, there's a hose line operating inside that apartment, or that if it's a living room, flowing water, putting out fire, and you can see the hose line coming out the front window. So he was up there with another engine company. But getting back to my point is if I have a company that's there, they see a potential victim and a potential rescue situation, somehow that needs to be communicated to IC, because the the IC's probably got other things going on. In this case, they've got ventilation going on the other side of the building. They're trying to, the IC's trying to coordinate everything. If I know that there's a rescue situation going on, I might delay transitioning to the defensive strategy while we mitigate this rescue situation, whatever that is. And I'm going to be a little bit hesitant to allow for any other type of ventilation going on in the building unless the interior crews are calling for it. So how do we communicate that out? That's easier said than done, because I'm sure the first thing is, well, he's busy making a decision. Should I go for this gal? I've got the attack team in there. Somebody's got to do some effort. You see firefighters that are out on the front porch. One of my frustrations, like with Blue Card, is that, could somebody, it's not in the realm of a perfect scene, but could one of those other firefighters there realize that there's a rescue situation going on and that the officer is actually doing the rescue? Can they not get on the radio and say, Main Street Command, or whatever the command is, from ladder 2 firefighter, we have a rescue situation going on the alpha side of the building that ladder 2 is involved in. That way, at least the IC is aware of the situation, what's going on. So obviously you don't see that, you don't hear that communication, and so we are in the middle of a transition between an offensive and a defensive fire, and they have affected rescue. So Danny basically gets suspended for freelancing, not being with his crew, and all that else. Anything you want to?
Did you mention the tiller, why his crew was delayed? So one of the facts that came out, there was some Facebook banter about, well, maybe the crew should be suspended because they were too slow getting to the fire, and so there was some misinformation. So they arrived on a 3-person tillered apparatus. So the driver and tillerman are getting their air packs and everything on, and so that's why he hopped out ready to go, and his crew was slightly delayed behind him. It wasn't because they were, incompetent in getting to the fire. So just to get that out there, so people have the facts on that.
And to that point, and something that Ryan and I were talking about before we decided to sit down in front of the camera, was there's a lot of things that come out on social media. I mean, just use the coronavirus that's going on right now. And there's a lot of facts. People don't always have all of the facts, and so assumptions are made. So early on, when this became an argument, that was being debated in social media, primarily on Facebook, some people that were taking the defensive position of, the department has to have rules and regulations. One of the things that was brought up is, well, you're allowed to have 2 in, 1 out. You're talking about 2 in, 2 out, 2 in, 1 out. Well, the 2 in, 1 out is for a rescue situation. Well, the problem with somebody arguing that, they obviously didn't know what was going on in the fireground, because they had at least an engine company, a truck company, and then Captain Dwyer's truck company arriving. So this is not a 2 in, 1 out situation. And you could even argue, he's not with his crew. So the fire chief's concern was that he's jeopardizing other firefighters because he's not with his crew. So he's lost crew integrity. Well, they're getting dressed. So he is now part of, I don't know who the engine company is up on that porch, but he's now working with that engine company. Is there a better way to handle that and how to communicate that? Absolutely. In my organization, we call it piggybacking. If I separated a crew for whatever reason, I only had 1 or 2 individuals, I can take those 2 individuals and I can piggyback them onto another company on the accountability system. That it takes a little bit of time to do that, and it has to be communicated out to everybody. But by no means was he operating all by himself. He was with another crew.
And we don't know, from this video, it doesn't look like, we don't know how far he was inside the building. Coming off the rig as the ladder officer, you get assigned to search. He's going up there to do a size up of a go-no go situation, and he spots a victim. That's a little different than just starting a search by yourself. And so those are some facts that we don't have, but this video makes it appear that he does a pretty hasty reach and grab, pull the victim out who was at the front door. So I think there's a big difference between that and starting a search independently of your crew and going inside a building, beyond a body length. And so those are facts we don't know. But from the video, it appears that it had to have been pretty quick. And here's his crew coming up behind him, likely. So
the discussion point with the crew getting ready, this kind of speaks to another big argument that's happening in the American Fire Service, and that's the clean cab movement. And first of all, just remember that clean cabs is just not removing equipment out of the cab and putting them in other places of the apparatus, specifically the SCBAs. There's a number of things that need to be done, and maybe one of the easiest things to do, it seems, is to, when you're speccing out new apparatus, don't put the packs inside the cab. And so now you're reducing their exposure. But this goes to show the potential impact of, and this is not even a clean cab issue, but this kind of gives you an idea, or some vision in the future of, if we go clean cabs, we've removed all of our gear and all of our packs outside the cab, and they're going to be in some other compartment. Well, when you have a tiller fire apparatus, the driver and the tillerman they can have their bunker bottoms on, but they're not going to have packs in their seats. And so now that's spending time for them to get ready. This kind of gives you a glimpse into what's potentially going to happen with clean cabs in the future. We've discussed clean cabs. My department doesn't do clean cabs. I know that it's come up for a number of departments have discussed doing it. There's a department in our area that they actually spec'd out a new piece of apparatus, and they went with the clean cab concept, meaning moving their packs outside of the apparatus. But really it comes down to, what level. Well, first of all, it's everything that's on there when we're talking about clean cabs. But in kind of looking at some research on clean cabs, and I don't want to get too far into, get away from the topic that we're talking about here, but an article that was written in Fire Engineering basically talked about, what we really need to be doing is, is it prudent for us? I'm going to quote the article, quote, "A prudent strategy for reducing occupational exposure to fireground contaminants can be adapted from our radiation exposure acronym, ALAR, or ALARA. And basically what he's saying is, we want our exposure to be as low as reasonably achievable. And I think that's, when we look at the fire service and what we're doing, is we are going to be exposed to a lot of different contaminants. But what we need to do is we want to make sure that doesn't, the two collide with our safety and our mission. Well, ultimately, what is our mission in the fire service? And so what we should be doing is trying to reduce that down to as low as reasonably achievable in regards to our exposure. So and that leads to now the philosophy of what we should be doing, our mission. What is it? What is our mission in the fire service, and are we meeting it when we make decisions like this?
Yeah, there's an article out there floating around. If somebody has it, please send it. I can't bring it up to directly quote it, but it's Gordon Graham. Gordon Graham is famously known for being a risk management lecturer, runs a software program, lots of stuff. Most people probably know who Gordon Graham is, but he was quoted talking about clean cabs, and from a risk management standpoint, saying that the potential for a crew to arrive on a scene and have an immediate rescue in front of them presents an opportunity for them to act without the appropriate PPE. And in his opinion, what it said was that we're going to have times where you're going to have people acting without the appropriate PPE because of the situation they're put in. And from a risk management standpoint, clean cabs don't make sense. And I mean, from Gordon Graham, that's really saying something for a guy that's banked his career on risk management. So, but if somebody has that article, please send it over. I'd like to have it directly. So, on the mission topic, we have Atlanta's. This is Atlanta's homepage. We have their mission statement and their core values. So, the vision statement for Atlanta Fire. Atlanta Fire Rescue strives for excellence in emergency preparedness and response to enhance our customer-focused, innovative role as industry leaders while overcoming expanding risks. And then Their core values are innovative, inclusive, committed, courageous, excellence, ethical, professional, and transparent. And so I think the next discussion piece is, did Captain Dwyer meet their vision statement, their mission statement, and their core values in the actions that he took at that time?
Well, I'm going to add to that, looking at, so a lot of departments do standards of cover, and so they got to create documents for standards of cover. And one of the documents is created for the Atlanta Fire Department is, it's called their, we don't have it up on the screen, but the Atlanta Fire Rescue Department Doctrine. And it was done when Chief Cochran was still with the Atlanta Fire Department, but the current fire chief, Chief Slaughter, was a deputy chief when this was pieced together. And one of the key parts in it, and this will be the discussion piece that we're having, is what's the expectations of the customers that you're serving, in this case the citizens that you're serving. And quoting this in their mission is that we exist as an organization to serve the citizens of Atlanta. Ultimately, our customers decide the services we deliver. Our personnel have an obligation to provide those services in the most professional and efficient manner. And that's coming right from their doctrine. And I think the biggest problem, and we've done standards of cover in my kind of smaller relative to the Atlanta Fire Department. And as Ryan and I were talking, as our time, been together for the last couple of days, is like, it's really difficult to get a true slice of what your customers want, because I don't know how many citizens they brought in when they were doing this to ask them, what do you expect from your fire department? My department is total now 160,000 people, and if we brought in 10 people to get their perspective on our standards of cover, that really is not a really good slice of what society is. So, one, I would argue, as the captain's getting disciplined over, is he being disciplined correctly, or was he acting in the interest of the taxpayers or of their customers? Was he fulfilling that obligation? It comes up like the oath and, what is our real job? What is our real mission? I think it's difficult to kind of find out, to really narrow that down to what does your customer. So as I was telling Ryan earlier, I think it has a lot to do with assumptions, that you would think that the citizens what level of protection do they want from their police department? So when a bad guy comes or something's going on, they expect the police department to get between them and the bad guy and to eliminate that threat completely, at whatever risk. And I think we believe the same for our military. We expect our military to put their lives on the line to protect our nation. And I think it's easily to assume that the taxpayers that you are or the taxpayers that are funding your organization, they're probably thinking the same thing about their fire department, that they expect us to risk our lives and to put ourselves in a position between a threat and them and rescue them in that situation. It's not always about fire. It can be about other things. So it's really difficult I don't think that the chief personally, I don't think the chief is responding to what is being expected out of the taxpayers of the city of Atlanta.
Yeah, I think we can agree that there's a different level of expectation in law enforcement, and we see that over and over again. And having a previous background in law enforcement, sometimes it baffles me the risk-adverse statements that are coming out of the leaders in the fire service. And we can talk about a couple different issues. I was having a conversation with an officer a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how officers are not held to the safety standards that we are, that if they want to jump in a river and make a rescue without any water rescue training, any life jacket, they can do that. If they want to go into a house fire by themselves, they can do that, untrained, unequipped. And I'm not advocating that we make reckless decisions, but there seems to be a different standard for us, and what is it that our community expects. And I think when we look at the Parkland incident, where you had a deputy who failed to act, Deputy Scott Thompson from Broward County.
Peterson.
Oh, excuse me, Scott Peterson.
Scott Thompson is the chief in
sorry,
in the
sorry,
colony.
Chief. Sorry, Chief. You're good. we love Chief Thompson. No, sorry. So, anyways, he failed to act, and everybody's aware of it. It made national news. There was an expectation that he was going to go into a situation where he was likely could be injured. And the statistics tell us that if you're the first in contact team to engage a suspect in an active shooter incident, that you have a 50% likelihood of being shot. So that's a pretty risky situation to go into, but the expectations of the community are you're going to go in and take on that risk. And when he didn't, there was community outcry. He was immediately suspended and then resigned, and then he was actually charged for child neglect. So why are we holding ourselves to a different standard than our police officers when we have what we believe is the community expecting us to do the same thing? I think we just don't get brought into the limelight like the police officers do. So I think we're dropping the ball in meeting the expectations of the community the same as the police are.
I'd say not to. I mean, hopefully you're not missing our intent here. We're wanting to create some discussion on this, kind of bring it back to, talk about something other than the coronavirus, but also bringing it back to discussing what truly is the mission. How do you guys get to where you're at in an organization? Do you really know what your department expects of you as a company officer, as a firefighter, as a battalion chief or a chief officer? Is it clearly outlined? And for me, I think this is there's a lot of things going back to Captain Dwyer. There's a number of things that can have been done differently in communicating to the IC and all of that. And I think what's happened is the chief is trying to use an opinion that he was freelancing. There was no accountability there, which I would agree. There was probably very little accountability in that situation. And to suspend somebody for that, when we really look at it, we look at the doctrine that they have, what they believe, their mission, their vision, their core values. I think Danny was acting within the scope of their organization. But how do we get to this point? And we're not advocating to go and take a lot of risk over something that, we know that we would risk a lot to save a lot. We would risk little to save little. But really what it comes down to, and I think this is kind of the police thing, Ryan having past law enforcement experience, is that how do we train our people so that they're ready for it? The best thing for reducing risk, and I didn't say eliminate risk because we work in a risky profession, but we can reduce risk. So the best way to reduce risk is through training. And maybe utilizing Danny's situation. Atlanta's a pretty busy fire department. Danny's working on a truck company. I'm assuming sees a decent amount of work. I know some of the individuals in that area that have worked for that organization. I'm sure they do a decent amount of training, but they're training him to be ready to make a split-second decision on what I should do. So while I might have said earlier that that needs to be communicated that they're in a rescue situation, the captain made a decision, saw the opportunity to affect the rescue. There's no time to get on the radio and to communicate that, which is why I say then we have to get outside of a standard communication model in the IMS system, and somebody needs to say on the radio, I'd even go with a mayday, mayday, mayday. We've got a rescue situation if the firefighter didn't know what else to say. But something needs to be communicated. But really it comes down to the more training we do, the easier it is to make those split-second decisions that makes us safer. The police do it all the time, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And as organizational leadership, I think you have to look at, in that moment, you're talking about a split-second decision when your heart rate is high. All those things have to be put in perspective, and we've seen that with law enforcement where there's been a shooting and the camera is, officers wearing body cam or there's a dash camera. Even at regular speed, it's so fast that they have to slow it down to identify that there's a weapon in someone's hands. That's a split-second decision, and so that has to be in part of the thought process when you're looking at how did somebody act, and it goes back to, were they acting within the core values, the mission, the things that they were trained on? And if the answer is yes, and maybe there could have been a slightly better way to go about it, but they had 1 second to make that decision, do we discipline them, or do we go back to the training ground and say, hey, this is how we're going to train for this in the future? I think that's the only way to build a good organizational culture, because if people are afraid to make a split-second decision that's going to be life or death for one of our victims, and they're afraid of the outcome, they're going to get suspended or fired, we're going to see more fire fatalities where we fail to act because people are afraid of the outcome. And we don't need that in the fire service. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I think maybe to wrap this up, we're about at 30 minutes right now, and we had said we were only going to talk for 15. But I think just kind of bringing everything back together is one, when you're on any of the social media, make sure you try to get as much of the information as possible before you take a position on anything. Try to slow down, take in the information, and that goes on both sides, being that you're going to be critical of it or you're going to support it and say that they're well within their scope of practice or whatever it may be. The other thing should be that how important training is. We love training. We do a lot of training. Ryan and I do, not together because we're in different organizations, but affiliated with a lot of training. Training is probably the best thing that we can do to prepare our people to be able to make these split-second decisions, and to whatever risk they're going to be taking in a situation like that, they're going to be the safest they possibly can be. And then lastly, just know that what we decide that we're going to do on behalf of our customers, the taxpayers, how do we truly know what they want? And that's why I go back to my statement is I think there's a lot that's got to be assumed, and the assumption is that the taxpayers pay a decent amount of money for us to do our jobs. We've taken an oath. Our oath is to protect our communities, and a lot of times we're going to be putting ourselves at risk in doing so. And sometimes we get hurt, and unfortunately we might lose a firefighter as a result to it. But do we truly understand what our taxpayers want from us? And so with that, I don't really have any more. You guys can add more comments to this. This will be posted up on our Young Officers on Fire page, and we'll see where the discussion goes from there.
That's it.
All right.
Captain Danny Dwyer, we're with you. We support you. That's about it.
Awesome.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks, everybody.